Hey guys, sorry, I'm starting a new live here and I messed with the internet. So hopefully we should be good on this video. So sorry for all of the connection issues. Okay. So I'm going to pick up where we left off in the last video. So if you're starting this one, just go back and check the first one out. We just had some internet issues. So I'm just continuing on this one. Okay. So hopefully it's all worked out now. So we're talking about like what the problem is when you don't create boundaries in your life. Okay. So we talked about it ruins your relationships, talked about it's kind of keeping you in like a victim state, right? Where you're not taking responsibility for what you could do. Okay. With like creating boundaries in your life. And then thirdly, like it affects, like I talked about earlier, like it literally affects your emotional well-being, right? Like how you feel. It affects your energy, right? Your finances, your relationships, all of it are affected when you don't set boundaries in your life. And it literally like keeps us from feeling how we want to feel and creating the life that we want to create, right? Like it's literally feeling like not feeling how we want to feel, right? Which again drives our actions and the results that we're able to create. So now let's talk about what are the results, like what's the result when you do create boundaries in your life? Like what can that do in your life? Okay, so when we set boundaries, first it adds clarity for us and what we want in our life and for other people. Okay. Cause remember I talked about it just a couple minutes ago is like, it shows people how you want to be treated, right? Like it shows people, what you expect, and it's clear. It's like clarity for yourself and clarity for other people. The second thing it can do is like builds like true relationships, right? Like it's you and your truest self, like being honest, right? And building a real, true, honest relationship. Okay, it gives structure. It allows us to focus on what is in our control, how we can create, how we can contribute, okay? It empowers us to create how we want to feel, okay? Versus like feeling resentment and wishing people would do things differently and wishing that they would just get it, right? It's like, no, like when we create boundaries, it empowers us to create how we want to feel because we're deciding the action that we are going to take, right? Intentionally, how we are going to contribute. The next way it changes your life is you're in control of your actions, right? You're deciding what you're going to do when you set a boundary. And again, that means you are in control of your results. And then lastly, it's like, well, I guess I have two left, but it's like our way of loving ourselves. It's like our ultimate act of self-love, okay? Because again, it's protecting yourself. When you set boundaries, you are literally like protecting you're loving yourself. You're protecting yourself. You're protecting yourself physically. You're protecting yourself emotionally, financially. It's protecting your time and your energy. And then lastly, it's like when we set boundaries, that allows us to live a life where we're feeling our best, right? We feel our best and we're able to create our best life. It's feeling our best. It's creating our best life. It's living our best life. Okay. So now we're going to get into the how-to. So we're going to keep this really simple and I'm going to walk you through just a quick way to set boundaries. It's so simple and yet it's like a thing that so many of us aren't doing that would make such a huge impact in our life. Okay. I feel like I'm going to sneeze. Okay. I'm holding it together. Okay. So how to set boundaries. Are you ready? You can use this simple template. When this happens, blank, I will do this. That's it. How beautiful and simple is that? When this happens, I will do this. Okay, that is the template that you can use to just fill in the blank and create boundaries in your life. Okay, when this happens, I will do this. And sometimes you tell people your boundary, like, hey, if this happens, I'm going to do this. But we don't have to. A lot of times we don't have to because again, a boundary is for us. Okay, it's to protect us. It is for us. So sometimes you might find it useful and appropriate to tell the person like you're creating this boundary, but you might not. It might not be useful. And so either way, you can tell them, you cannot tell them, because again, it is for you. So now I'm going to go into 3 tips. Like that sounds so simple, right? That little template. But I'm going to give you 3 tips on how to really make your boundaries effective and really work and transform your life. Okay, so the first thing I want you to think of when you think of creating your boundaries is that they are for you. Like one of the most important things, if not the most important thing to think of when you're creating a boundary, is that a boundary is for you. It's to protect you. It is not to control another person. So many times we think, oh, I'm going to create this boundary, but we're really just trying to control someone else and like give them an ultimatum. If you don't do this, I'll do this. Like that is not what a boundary is. It's very unhealthy and it's not good for anyone in the relationship, okay? But a boundary is for you, always for you, to protect you, just like I talked about like a gate or a fence around your house. That is what a boundary is around you and your like emotional well-being and like I said, your time and your energy and your feelings and all those things. Like a boundary protects you. It doesn't control other people. They can do whatever they want, right? They can do whatever they want. That your happiness does not depend on that. But a boundary is to protect you. So, and I'm going to give you a couple examples here to kind of show you how to think of this when we think of it for us, not for them. So it's like smoking. Okay. It's like, I don't allow people to smoke in my house, right? That's a boundary of mine. Like you can't smoke in my house. Now I'm not telling those people that they cannot smoke, right? Like you can't smoke. It's bad for you. You need to change your life and not smoke. Like, no, a boundary is for me. It protects me. So like, I don't want you smoking around me, right? Like if you're smoking in my house, I'm going to ask you to leave, right? If you light up a cigarette in my car, I'm going to ask you to get out and find a ride with someone else, right? Like I'm not telling you can't smoke, but like my boundary is I don't allow smoking in, my vehicle or in my car or whatever, or in my house. Okay. That's an example of like a boundary. Okay. Again, it's for me, not for them. Or a boundary would be, okay, like if you drink more than 2 alcoholic beverages, I'm not going to ride with you. I'm not going to, get in your car and let you drive. I'm not saying that you can't drink alcohol or that, you can't drink more than 2. I'm just saying if you drink more than 2, I'm not going to, get in the car. I'm going to find a different ride home. Okay. If you smoke in my house, I'm going to ask you to leave. If you drink more than X amount of drinks, I'm not going to ride home. I'm going to find a different ride. If you are more than 15 minutes late, like say, you guys, if you know me, you're laughing. You're like, yeah, right. I'm late a lot. Okay. I'm late a lot. It's like set a boundary. So it's like, if you are more than 15 minutes late, I'm going to leave without you. Right. If you are more than 15 minutes late, I'm going to leave the restaurant, or I'm going to, if I'm driving somewhere, I'm going to leave without you. I'm not saying, hey, you can't be late. Why aren't you late? Why aren't you on time? You need to be on time. You need to work on being on time. I'm sick of you being late. It's like, no, I'm just going to, again, I'm not the victim. I'm not going to like sit and wallow in it and try to get someone else to change. A boundary says, if this happens, I will do this. Right? It doesn't sit and try to control another person and change another person and take on all of that, like negative emotion and all that. No, it just says, if this happens, I will. It's very clear. It gives clarity. It lets other people know how to interact with you versus me sitting for 15 minutes and stewing over this person being late, right? Like I'm so mad at them and then I feel resentment towards them and, I try to control them. Same thing with the like drinking or whatever. It's like, nope, it's very clear. I'm focusing on what's in my control and how I'm taking action and how I'm protecting myself rather than focusing on controlling someone else. That is not what a boundary is for. A boundary is for you, not to control another person. It simply states what you will do if something happens. Okay? Very important. So tip number 1 is that it is for you, not to control anyone else. So really check in and be like, is this boundary about me trying to control someone else? Or is this me taking responsibility for myself and intentionally stating what I will do if this happens? Okay. It's like, if you yell, right? Like if you yell at me, I'm going to leave the room, right? I'm not going to sit and say like, you shouldn't yell. You yell too much. You're too loud. It's like, nope. Here, because I'm just trying to control someone else and change them, which is no good and it's impossible. But I'm going to say, okay, like what is in my control is me. And I'm going to clearly decide what I'm going to do if this happens. So if you yell at me, if you raise your voice, I'm going to leave the room and we can talk later. Okay. That's my boundary. Tip number 2 is be specific. Okay. Tip number 2 is be specific when you're setting your boundaries. The more specific and intentional you can be, the better. Okay, so I had a client who got a divorce, and she was letting her ex-husband he was texting her all the time, and it had been like a year, and he was still like texting all the time and like attacking her and questioning her and just really affecting her emotionally, okay? And she was just like, I don't know what to do about it, like, and just like, this happened this week. And so finally I was like, okay, we need to set a boundary around talking with him about how he's allowed to communicate with you. And she's like, well, like how, and I'm like, well, we need to get very specific, right? Like if he says this, I'm going to do this, right? Like, and we can let him know, this is what's on the table. Like, here's what we can talk about. We can talk about, the kids, because she had said, well, we have kids together, so I can't just stop communicating. And I'm like, yes, you have kids together. And I've talked about this, I think, before on a video here on my podcast too, but because it's such a great example. But it's like, yes, you have kids together. So, okay, what are the parameters? What is the boundary I want to set? We can talk about the kids only. If it's about the kids, sure. But I'm not letting you don't have the authority or the place in my life to talk to me about anything else, to attack me as a woman or a mom or talk about the past, or that's inappropriate. And so I am setting a boundary to protect myself. Okay. Like I said, you need to imagine like, that's like someone coming, like the things he's saying that she's telling me and showing me. It's like, I want you to imagine like that's someone in a grocery store coming up and saying those things to you. How would you respond to that? It's like, you'd be like, what? You can't like talk to me like that. And you'd like walk away, right? Like, but we're letting this person affect us, right? And they don't have the place in our life anymore to talk. It's inappropriate. Like, it's not even appropriate. So what are the boundaries I can set up to protect myself from this? So it's the more specific she got, the better. So we would hone it. Like we would work on this every time she would come. She would say, well, this happened. And it's like, okay, we need to be even more specific, right? Like if this is said, this is what I'm going to do. Like this is off the table, right? Like these are the very specific things that we can talk about, like a drop off time, a school function, whatever. But if there's anything else, like if you talk about anything else that's not approved very specifically in my boundary, I'm going to, and we were very specific, I'm going to give you one warning. And then if you continue to say anything else, I'm going to block you. And you can contact my parents or text my parents if there's an emergency and you need to get a hold of me. Right? It's like we got so specific. And she said to me, the thing that has been the most like life-changing and the most helpful to me, she's like, is how you always like get me to be more specific, because the more specific we are, the more prepared we are. The clearer it is to us exactly what we are going to do. Okay. And it gives us clarity. It gives us power. It's like, when this happens, I'm going to do this. And it literally changed everything for her. Like she became like, went from this victimized, like feeling so just affected and down, to being empowered, to being like, nope, I'm very clear about what I'm doing, and like took her power back, totally took her power back. And that led to creating so many like results just from being empowered, right? From protecting herself, led to her creating so many results, like starting her own business and buying her a new home, like so many things, because she felt so different and empowered. That is the power of what boundaries can do for you. I had another client who, just a quick example for you, but she had her new husband, his kids, when they came over, they kept bringing their dogs, and they had bigger dogs, and she had like a little dog, and her dog was getting, there was just all these bad things, and then it made her and her husband argue. So she had been asking the kids like, hey, no dogs allowed, like just leave the dogs at home. It's like affecting my dog and making him sick and anxious, and like, I just don't want other dogs in my home. And I agree, like I'm the same way, like I don't want pets brought over, okay? So she'd made this request, and she'd said, hey, I don't want dogs in my home, can we just leave the dogs at home when you come over? And yet every time the kids came, they wouldn't listen to her, and they still kept bringing their dogs, and it was making her angry. And then she would get mad at her husband because he wasn't standing up, and it was like affecting her emotionally. Because she was requesting, but not creating a boundary. So I said to her, because we were coaching together, and I said, okay, like it sounds like we need to create a boundary here. So what a boundary again says is, if this happens, I will do this. Okay. So what I had her create is, we came up with, if you bring dogs to the house, I'm going to ask you to leave them in the car or put them in a crate. She had like a crate in the garage. So if you continue to bring your dogs after I've asked you not to, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to ask you to leave the dogs in the car or put them in a crate. And it took so much for her to actually text that out and to say that. Because again, we worry so much about like what people are going to think and if they're going to be upset at us. And this is where coaching really comes in. But it's like, we really had to work through that of, that's up to them. If they get upset, they can own that. Like if they get angry, that's not on you, right? Like you're not making them angry. They're choosing their emotion. They're choosing to be angry, right? You've made a request. You've said, this is my home. This is my boundary. I'm not letting dogs into my home. And if they are choosing to still bring their dogs over, then you're creating a boundary that says, I've requested that you don't do that. If you're still going to do that, if this happens, I will do this. If you bring dogs to my house after I've said no dogs allowed in the house, then I'm going to ask you to leave them in the car or put them in a crate in the garage. It's very clear. It's very simple. It's very specific. And like I said, it's clear to you. It's clear to other people how you want them to interact. Like you've created a clear boundary. Rather than, hey, can you not bring dogs over? When they do, it's like, I'm angry. I'm picking a fight with my husband. Why is he not sticking up? It's like this big thing. And I'm feeling resentment of these kids bringing their pets over. They're not listening to me. Or it's like I create a boundary and everyone's very clear. And if they choose to get mad when you make your boundary and you stick to your boundary, then they own that. You didn't make them upset. You created a boundary to protect you. And if they choose to do that, then they're owning being upset. Okay. So your boundaries should be very specific. The more specific you can be, the more prepared you're going to be. Again, just like my client with her ex-husband, it's like, we can talk about this. If you say these things, I'm going to block you. Right. And it was a very clear boundary. Okay. The more specific, the more prepared you will be. That is the power of boundaries in your life. They say exactly what you're going to do to protect yourself. And then the third tip for your boundaries is you must be willing to uphold them. Like you must be willing to hold your boundaries and like stick to them. And this is where people have a very hard time. Okay. Like we say we're going to do something, but then when it comes to it, we're like, ooh, like we created that boundary. And then when it comes down to like actually sticking to it, it becomes very hard for us. Because again, we care what other people think. We don't want to make people upset. It's like, so we're choosing to feel upset. So we're choosing to feel resentment. We don't want to feel the uncomfortable emotion, right, of sticking to our boundary, making other people feel uncomfortable. So we're just taking all the negative emotion on us. We're not saving anything. We're not saving any relationship, right? We're just feeling resentment and frustration and anger towards the other people rather than just coming forward with our boundary and sticking to our boundary. And like having a real relationship and feeling better, protecting ourselves and feeling better. Okay, so the third tip for your boundary is you must be willing to commit to that boundary. You don't create a boundary and then like flounder and not stick to it. When it comes down to it, you stick to your boundary. Okay, and again, this is one of the big ways and one of the biggest things I think coaching helps with is it helps you in real time. Like it helps you work through the emotions. Like when my clients come to me and they're like, well, this happened this week, or, you know, my ex texted me and like, this is the problem I had with keeping the boundary, or like, I had a client who, just another example, I want to give you guys examples too. I had a client who, whenever she had friends over, her neighbor would call her and text her and be like, hey, I want to come over. Like, you know, and so my client had said, well, we're going to start not being on the deck. We're going to start staying indoors and stuff. And I'm like, no, like a boundary will protect you. A boundary is what's going to allow you, like you don't have to change your life in order to not make someone upset. You need to create a specific boundary. Like, hey, if I have friends over and you're calling and texting, I'm not going to respond. And then she's like, oh, but then she'll just come over. And I'm like, okay, then you say, again, a very specific boundary. If my neighbor comes over when I have friends over, I'm going to say, hey, can I catch up with you later? I have some friends over right now. Right? Very clear. It sounds so simple, but it will change your life. It's like being specific, being prepared, being, committed to keeping your boundaries and sticking to them, like actually following through on them will change everything for you. It's like, it's so empowering and clear, and it's clear for you and it's clear for other people. But we have such a problem sticking to our boundaries because we worry what other people will think. And so the tips that I'm giving you, like I told you exactly how to set a boundary, right? I mean, I told you exactly the simple template you can use to set a boundary. If this happens, I'll do this. It sounds so simple, right? It's like if it was just knowledge, we would all be like, oh yeah, easy breezy. We're changing our life. We're setting boundaries and changing our life. But it's not, because of all that comes after that. Right? All we have to do after we set that boundary, actually applying it, actually implementing that in real time and interacting with other people and other things in our life, that is where the work comes in, right? It's not as simple as just creating a boundary. There it is. That's how you do it. Fill in the blank. If this happens, I'll do this. But then what happens is as soon as we're confronted with actually following through on that, that's when we get stuck. That's when we flounder, and then we're like, never mind. And we go back to living a life where we're hiding inside so our neighbor can't see us, right? We're living a life that's like not the life we want to live because we will not create boundaries to protect ourselves, to protect our emotional well-being, to protect our energy and our finances, and you name it. Boundaries are there to protect us, and they are such a powerful tool if we use them and implement them. So that's tip number 3. And again, that's where I see coaching come in. It's like, you want to set a boundary and see it change your life. It's like coaching helps you consistently work through the emotions needed to keep that boundary, to set that boundary and actually stick to that boundary until it becomes a thing in your life that's like completely changed. It's like, this is how you're interacting with this person. This is the boundary that's set and that you are sticking to. It changes everything, but that is the power of coaching. Coaching allows you to get back into the emotion needed to get whatever result that you want. That's always what I say my favorite thing about coaching is like we fall out of the emotion needed to reach that goal or do that thing or make that change in our life. But when we coach one-on-one every single week, we fall out of the emotion, but we get right back into it every single week. You come, we talk together, we get right back, and we get you right back into the emotion needed to keep going and make progress and make real change in your life. It seriously changes everything. It helps people create things in their life they never thought they were capable of creating, right? Because they've never been able to do it on their own. It's like I just had my client say to me, she's like, on my own, I would just fall out of things and it would be weeks, months, years, right? But now just the compounding results we've been able to create because every week we're getting back into that emotion. It's unbelievable. It changes up. It's like showing up for yourself in a way you've never been able to do before. So to summarize what we talked about today, which was so important, like I feel like boundaries are so important. And like I said, I think of one of my posts, it's like if there's one thing I've seen just like amaze me and my clients, it's the results of creating boundaries in their life. It changes just everything in how they feel. So again, to summarize what we talked about the purpose of boundaries is to protect you. It's like a gate, like a fence around your house is what boundaries are to you. They protect you. They protect your emotional well-being. They protect your energy. They protect your finances. They protect your time. They protect everything. They're there to protect you. Okay. It's like, when this happens, I'll do this. It's boundaries to protect you and your life. And the second thing we talked about is what you want your boundaries to. I gave you like 3 tips on boundaries, right? Like the first thing was boundaries are always about you. They're always about protecting you. They're not about controlling other people. Other people can do whatever they want. A boundary says, if this happens, this is what I'll do, right? Like, it's not about controlling the other people in your life. They can do whatever they want. The only thing you can control is you. And that is the power of a boundary. It empowers you to take control of what you can take control of, which is you and the actions that you're going to take. Okay. It changes everything. It's like, if this happens, I'll do this. You can do whatever you want. I'm not going to like be resentful and try to change you and try to control you. You have to do this, right? An ultimatum. It's like, no, boundaries are for you. So check in with yourself. They're not to control other people. So again, tip number 1, about you, not about anyone else. Tip number 2 is have them be very specific. The more specific you are, the more ready you are for that situation and for exactly what you were going to do. You're going to be prepared for that. Okay. Like when we're not really clear on our boundaries or like being specific about things that are happening, that's when it's like, well, they get like the gray area, right? Like, or it happens and we kind of let it slip by and we don't like stick to our boundaries. Like, we need to be very specific. If this happens or this happens, this is what I'm going to do very clearly. Even just knowing like the action you'll take or the words that you'll say makes you so prepared. So the more specific you can be on your boundary, the better. And then tip number 3 is you have to be willing to stay committed to your boundary. Like, you have to be willing and committed to following through on that boundary. Otherwise, they're pointless, right? Like, you have to be willing when that time comes, and it gets easier and easier because, again, you're teaching people how to interact with you too. Okay, so it's clear for you, it's clear for them. We have to be committed to holding that boundary, to following through on that. And what is the result when we create boundaries in our life? It's feeling your best. It's the best self-love ever. It's protecting yourself. It's protecting your feelings. It's protecting your emotional well-being. It's protecting, again, your time, your finances, your energy. It's allowing you to feel your best and live your best life and create the life that you really want, right? Because you're protected. You're protecting yourself. It's one of the best things you can do for yourself, to love yourself. And sorry, I like a tickle in my throat. And so if this talk, again, I had to do this in 2 talks because my internet was so shoddy. So go back and watch the first one and get the whole, get all of the boundary information. And if this is something that you struggle with in your life, like you're like pushing things down and you're living a life where you're frustrated and resentful at things that are happening or like things that you wish were different, like creating boundaries will change everything for you. And this is something I work deeply on with my clients, is helping them create boundaries, but then helping them to commit to those boundaries and follow through on those boundaries until it changes their life, literally changes their life and how their life is running and how they feel. It empowers them to know exactly what they're going to do. So if that's you and this really spoke to you, I want to offer you a free call, like free one-on-one, me and you. I want to hear all about it. I want to hear what's going on in your life. I want to hear what boundaries you wish you could create. Again, if this happens, I would do this. Like, what's happening in your life and what are the boundaries you are not setting that are causing you to feel resentment at people in your life or things in your life, right? That aren't going the way you want, but like you're not taking responsibility for that. I want to hear all about it. Bring it to me. We will brainstorm. I will help you create boundaries. I will have you leave with actions you can take right away. And it's a free call just to give you a taste of what coaching can do for you, because that's how powerful, that's how much I believe in coaching. I think everyone should get a taste of what coaching is like in their life. It's the best gift ever. And it's usually the thing that finally makes the difference in people's lives. So powerful. So I'm going to offer you a free coaching session. Bring all of your junk that you're not creating boundaries on, bring them to me. I will help you create boundaries. It's an hour-long free session that I offer you. All you have to do is go to JacquelineEmery.com/consult. And again, that's JacquelineEmery.com/consult, and you can book your free 1-hour session. So that's it for today. That's all I have for you today, my lovies. Such an important topic. Seems simple, but implementing it is where all the work comes, and it will change your life. So again, I would love to connect with you on a free call, and I will see you guys next week. All right. I love you. Have a great rest of the week. Bye.